Welcome to our channel Top Reddit Story. Make sure to subscribe our channel and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our hardest to reply your comment. NSFW. What's the worst thing you have witnessed at a bachelorette party? Went with the boys to a strip club down in Mexico. We were watching two girls rub whipped cream all over each other when we heard a scream. We all looked up and one of the girls came running out of the bathroom yelling in Spanish. One of the girls had just died of an overdose in the bathroom. Several men went upstairs, picked up the girl's limp body, and carried it downstairs and out the front door. All the girls were shaken and crying. Then the boss called them all into the back room while we all sat around gaping at each other. 5 minutes later the girls came out with fresh makeup and smiles on their faces, acting like nothing had happened. We all got so creeped out we just went home. I was at a bachelor party at a house where they brought a couple of escorts over. They were dancing and doing some party tricks in the living room, including shooting ping pong gonads into a bucket. The bucket kept getting moved farther and farther back, so the girls had to push harder and harder to launch the gonads. At the end, one of the girls was trying to set a new personal record and ended up blowing explosive diarrhea all over the carpet. By the time this happened, everybody was completely sheet-faced, so instead of properly cleaning it up, my buddy just threw some old towels over it and we kept on partying. His fiancée was pissed because they ended up spending a fair chunk of their wedding gift money on new carpet for the first floor of their house, since the Itsta never came out of the Berber carpet. Okay, so I'll clarify a little. The girls were shooting ping pong gonads from their pussies, but apparently when you do this you flex the same muscles that you would when you're going poop, so that's how the girl ended up sheeting all over. Got back to our room after. Someone made tea for everyone but put milk in mine. I don't take milk in my tea. I thought you were about to say they put the milk in with the tea bag first. I nearly broke out in a cold sweat. Guy passed out from drinking too much tequila. We found him in the bathroom asleep with his head in the toilet and ants crawling all over him. The night of my bachelorette party, which was very tame and pretty lame, a few of us decided to go out to the bars. We witnessed another party where there was a group of about 20 or so girls who were hammered. The bride seemed more messed up than the rest of them. She proceeded to call over the waitress and they started flirting. Like a lot. They went into the back office and started moaning super loud. I could only guess what was going on. My friends and I watched in horror. Then she announced to everyone at the bar that she couldn't get married because she realized she was a les. My night turned out to be pretty entertaining, but once in a while I think back to that girl and wonder if she went through with it or not. At my bachelor party, my friend was complaining about his girlfriend the whole time. He got plastered. Found the girl and they went to a coat closet to maquille it. She leaves him there because he was creepy. Eventually we got a call from security to pick him up in a wheelchair. We wheeled him back to our hotel room where he proceeded to go take a sheet and pass out, cracking his skull against the bathtub. I got to take an ambulance ride. 10/10 would do again. Groom was getting married at 1:30 PM the day after his bachelor party. As expected, the groomsmen took him out for some heavy drinking. He woke up the next morning in a hotel room to a 10 AM wake up call, with a sincere wish that he enjoyed his stay at the Kansas City Holiday Inn, faked by a friend. The best man had prepared ahead of time by picking up phone books, stationery, those local events and attractions flyers and magazines, notepads and other items from a hotel in Kansas City, and substituted those materials for the ones for the Chicago hotel that they dumped him at. Of course he checked the desk, found the Kansas City phone book, and panic ensued. I was at a strip club where they had one stage that everyone could sit around. They had one show at a time and each one was themed and pretty awesome. There was a Batgirl that rode a little Power Wheel Batmobile on the stage. There was a classic Victorian girl. Bunch of cool performances like that. One girl came out and was doing a fire show. She poured a ring of fire around the stage, was twirling fire batons. Then she pours alcohol in her mouth and goes for the breath of fire, but when she blows it all out, some of it splatters on her face and her face catches on fire. Bouncers start rushing the stage. A bunch of us jump up out of our chairs to help. The dancer is slapping her face and manages to pat out the fire. Then throws up her hands in air to say she's okay. Everyone hesitantly sat back down and she finished her show. While the smell of burnt hair permeated the place. We all put pity money up on the stage for her, but when she was finished she just grabbed she stuff and left. I think she was okay. Definitely missing some eyebrows and bangs though. Drunken backwards somersault off the 3rd floor balcony landing in the concrete basement landing. C6 and T1 and 2 fracture leading to becoming a 20s paraplegic. It just got real in this thread. Damn. Buddy's bachelor party. His brother is present. Entertainer is putting on a show. Inserts a test tube with a shot of tequila into her dirt star. Then pulls it out. Apparently so someone can take the shot. Bachelor's brother steps up. Takes test tube. Sucks the outside clean. Then does the shot. Plenty of WTF faces all around. I wasn't there to witness it. But my husband not only had to pay for himself at his own bachelor party, but had to spot for at least 2 of his groomsmen. Including the best man. They went to their normal bar. And then bowling. One of my husband's groomsmen woke up at 6 AM the morning after the bachelor party and made a large, delicious bacon breakfast, for himself only. Enough to wake everyone up so they could watch him eat before cooking for themselves. Rented a cabin in the woods and had like 30 dudes there for my buddy's bachelor party. After about 36 hours of drinking and drug use we got some escorts up there, basically strippers that are more frisky. We are all hammered and the 2 girls give my buddy who is getting married the best dance I've ever seen. I probably would have came in my pants. After about 10 minutes of dancing they suddenly take his pants down and he was as soft as Play-Doh. In front of everyone. Was just too wasted to respond. The collective groan from everyone at that moment is something I can still hear today. I watched a bachelor party at a strip club. The bachelor was totally wasted. Strippers got him on stage. Put him in a chair. Handcuffed him to the pole and then drew all over his face and chest with Sharpies. Can't imagine what the wedding was like the next day. Who the duck has a bachelor party the night before the wedding? Someone who's asking for it. Bachelorette party. Happening at a sports club that was playing football on TV at the time. They had a stripper come in and oiled himself up. Had squirty cream. Bride eating a banana from his underwear etc usual bachelorette stuff. Except the whole time in the middle of it was this old man sat on a bar still watching the football. He was there before they turned up and was too stubborn to move. So he's there with his pint about a foot away from this oiled up male stripper. Eyes glued to the screen refusing to move. Edit. Spelling. We were in a bachelorette party bar crawl in Austin. TX. Wound up spending most of the night partying alongside a bachelor party. Got way too high that night and passed out early. Woke up to find one of my friends passed out naked in the sofa with the groom. Our hotel room phone was ringing. It was the rest of the bachelor party. Who had been trying to locate him for hours. If there's a Jonathan Anderson in your room, make him go downstairs. We have to go back to Ohio. I walked in the living room of the hotel. Yelled John. Your friends are gonna leave you here. He jumped up. Grabbed his boxers. And literally ran out the front door without a word. He got married 6 days later. Do sharp. Edit. I used a fake name. Groom was not actually named Jonathan. We went on the Thursday before the Saturday wedding as this was allegedly the best night at local strip club that was notorious around town. We considered it a kind of gag trip. This one girl who was really trying hard on stage tosses her panties at the groom-to-be and hits him square in the face. Fast forward to Friday and the groom has pink eye. He's freaking out. He's drunk. He demands that our buddy punch him in the eye thinking that a black eye could conceal the true sin and offer a more wedding-friendly excuse. He took the hit like a champ. The bride was furious but the wedding went on. TLDR. Groom got pink eye from a nasty stripper and got punched to cover it up. Bachelorette party near Columbus, Ohio. Typical redneck Ohioans. Girl does a copious amount of shots and then goes shooting. Ends up shooting her neighbor's cat because she was so hammered. Girl gets arrested. Wedding is postponed due to illness. Last I heard they were still married happily. Guy was a very down-to-earth dude. Girl was a bottle of hellfire. Work weekends in my neighbor's pub. This is rural Ireland, but we get stags and hen nights from the nearest city quite a bit. Once had a stag do where someone managed to catch a deer and attempt to bring it into the pub. Deer was a young stag. Rammed one guy against the wall, breaking 2 of his ribs before bolting back into the night. Another stag do saw a guy pass out while playing pool, but in the process of faceplanting the pool table managed to hit the black ball with a cue and potted to win the game. I will never understand this shit about going out and cheating on the person you're going to marry. Right before you marry them. Let's just separate into groups and get lap dances and duck other people and not tell each other about it. Let me get some STDs real quick before this commitment thing, honey. At the end of my dad's bachelor party, his friends thought it would be a good idea to strip him naked, put him in a shark cage, on a trailer, and drop him off at his mother-in-law's house. I obviously didn't witness this, but have heard the same story from too many of his friends for it to be total bullshit. Was prepared to go for a night out for a pub crawl, but all we got was that the bachelor just wanted to stay at home and play video games all night. Dude, we can get tucked up and snort coke off a stripper's tits anytime. But once I'm married, I'm never gonna get to do this again. So sit down, shut up, and play some Mario Kart. My buddy passed out on the toilet while eating McChickens and taking a dump. So, a typical Tuesday night for some of us. I paid a stripper $260 and typing that into the ATM was the worst thing I saw that night. Had a mass trip to Vegas where it was supposed to be a multi-day bachelor party. Bride-to-be figures she wants to do the same and goes on the same weekend. Same flight. First night was great as the bachelor and bachelorette parties were separate and had its own plans, but the bride lost it in her party, and from the next morning on, she didn't want to be away from her fiancé for a single moment, thus ruining the rest of both parties. Also, one of the guys the next day violated the bro code and told the women every detail of the bachelor's party. We were at a bar and had the back room reserved to us. Stripper comes in and dances for the groom-to-be. Then a few of us step outside to have a cigarette on their unfinished back porch, and one of the guys fell off and into an oil drum filled with kitchen waste grease. Up to his waist in grease. I go over my sister's house to pick my fiancée up from her bachelorette party. The whole bridal party is wasted and my sister is the most drunk out all of them. I walk into someone puking in a trash can. Shortly after I got there, I pissed my sister off to the point she starts hitting me. Mind you, my sister is 4 foot 10 inches and I am close to 6 foot. Another husband of a drunk bridesmaid picks my sister up to carry her away and she kicks him in the nuts. She then goes back to punching me but slips and falls into a table. TLDR, my drunk sister picked a fight with me, a buddy of mine, and a table. She only lost to the table. I was in Mexico surfing and the house next to my friends was a rental and there was a bachelor party staying there and the bachelorette party was a couple streets away having separate fun. Well, me and my friends were drinking beer around the fire out back, and at about 1 AM the bachelorette party thought it would be funny to surprise the bachelor party in their underwear and funny hats they found. Turns out the bachelor party was more of just order a hooker for each dude and most of their significant others were the bachelorette party, so I don't think the wedding ended up taking place. Friend's bachelorette party in Montreal. Watched a male stripper take precum off his big dick with his finger and stick it in a girl's mouth without asking. We noped out of there soon after. Too young for a bachelor party, but I never miss the story about my uncle who was a smoker, and during the party a few days before the wedding the stripper they hired took his smoke, stuffed it into her cuter and smoked it. He took, and with lots of cheering and drinks he smoked the rest. Well, the wedding rolled around and he had a massive cold sore on his lip. We still blame it on stripper cooch. I'm probably not the only one who has ever seen something like this, but I was a manager doorman at a decent strip club and witnessed First hand. A bachelor party of nice, clean-cut young yuppie types come rolling in, high-fiving and partying. Nothing new. They paid cover and almost immediately hit the exit door 30 seconds later. Bachelor first with all his buddies behind him. Some looked odd and they were punching the others on the arm and telling them to shut the duck up. The last ones were dying ducking laughing. They had walked in and the dancer on stage, who had just went out for her very first time after secretly being a waitress for a few months, was pulling off her top in front of her horrified brother the bachelor and every dude she grew up with. She cried and cried and quit immediately. I gave the guys their cover back and they vanished, only to show back up after a little while and give the sister a ride home. It was ducked up, but we still laughed about it after work that night. Got invited to a bachelorette party of one of my friend's friends. I'm a guy, and no, I'm not the gay friend, wasn't going to go. But my heavy introvert friend explained she needed me to bail her and a couple other introverts out of the thing partway through. I say fine because they bribed me with food. Was a pretty big party in a massive house, so I was happily downstairs away from most of the noise. Notice turns out there were a number of guys who were invited. Odd but not unheard of. Half a dozen male strippers arrive. I think this is my opportunity during the distraction to get my friend out. All the guys get called upstairs and the bride is sitting on a stool topless. Apparently the plan was to have her blow jerk off every guy there plus the strippers and get proper icing before she got married because she didn't get enough action before getting hitched. Noped out with friend. Told groom what went down. Marriage called off. Small part of me regrets not staying, but the lack of STDs is probably an indication of doing the right thing. Nurses of Reddit, what is the spookiest thing that a patient did late at night? I used to work on a mental health unit and every hour we had to go into the patient's rooms to check on them, make sure they're breathing, not self-harming, etc. At night, we would use flashlights so we don't have to turn on the lights and wake them up. One day, a colleague was doing the round, and I heard a loud scream. I ran to her aid and saw a small female schizophrenic patient on top of her. Apparently the nurse went in and couldn't see the patient on the bed. The patient was against the wall, and as soon as she shined the flashlight at her, she charged at my colleague. We did rounds in groups of 2 after that. I was rounding on an elderly patient on the overnight shift. She was maybe 80-85 years old. She had some issues from a stroke but was generally pretty coherent and with it. She is laying down but opens her eyes wide and looks right at me when I enter. She says the devil is in this room. I'm not religious but I promptly walked out after I checked on her. Nope. Nope. Not today, Satan. This didn't happen super late at night, but I was floated to another unit between 7 PM to 11 PM. I had a patient who we all swear was possessed. She was in her early 70s and was a psych patient put on a medical floor for I think it was dehydration. She never closed her eyes. They were constantly wide open. And she'd track you while you were in the room. She would cackle this deep, raspy, maniacal laugh. The only words you could understand were "get out." She would be staring at you, cackling, mumbling nonsense, or speaking in tongues. Not sure lol, and then she'd scream "get out" then go back to cackling. She'd also twist her body, especially her neck, in these very odd, unnatural looking positions. When my unit called me back at 11, I happily got the duck out of there. I had a patient who would speak in 3 different voices. Her normal voice, her dad's voice, and a baby's voice. Normally it was just an inane chatter, but one night she started talking in her dad's voice to give the baby to him so he could hear it. The baby kept saying "please don't tell me" and her voice was crying. It didn't help it happened around Halloween. The nurse tending to my granddad had a grand story to tell. His mind went when he was in his 80s, but he still kept his body in shape. They said until he reached stage 5 Alzheimer's he would regularly work out and stay in great shape. In fact, they had to change their fence from a tall chain link fence to a tall wooden fence because he kept escaping. The nurse that was looking after my grandmother before she died would always tell me how she would talk about a baby living in her stomach. She would always tell me and my mom dad when we visited too. I keep feeling this baby inside of me. Needless to say, it was really scary seeing a formerly sharp, extremely intelligent family member go through dementia. My wife had a patient in the nursing home recently who was saying she was sore because she just had a baby last night. I work with animals. Turtles can imitate noises they have heard. One time a snapping turtle started growling. The growling was meant to sound like a dog, but because it was coming out of a reptile it was off. It sounded like a dinosaur combined with a human. Scary. I worked as a nurse's aide for a summer. At night, it was common for older people to talk with their deceased spouse or family member. Kind of sad. But I could tell that they still loved them. My great uncle does this with my great aunt Sam. The urn is sitting in their condo waiting until either he dies too or my mom visits Poland. Whichever comes first, because it's too expensive to fly over multiple times. He's been losing it mentally since she passed but won't accept help. So instead he just sits and talks to the urn. Not a nurse. But when I was 15 I had a severe allergic reaction that required a stay in hospital. The only bed they had available was on an adult ward. The hospital was a really old building, reminds me of the one in Return to Oz. I woke up in the middle of the night and there was this really old lady beside my bed, rubbing my head. I freaked out and started screaming, which must have startled the lady and caused her to start screaming. The nurses came running in and took her away and calmed me down. Looking back, I was off my face on whatever medicine they had given me and I was extremely uncomfortable, so I must have been unsettled in my sleep and this lady was probably trying to comfort me but accidentally freaked me out. Edit, a word. I was doing rounds in our mental health crisis bed around 2 AM one night. And as I'm peering into a room to see if a new admit is alive, I can't for the life of me see him. Then all of a sudden I hear down here this guy must have been about 3.5 feet tall, barely reaching the bottom of the observation window. I signed off his sheet and proceeded to the next cell and peer in. It's really dark but I can usually see the rise and fall of the chest without a light. I've got my hand against the window to peer in when I hear up here. At that moment I realize I'm staring into the chest of a giant standing on top of the window. This guy must have been 7'6" and about 400 pounds. Even though he was on the other side of the door, it gave me massive chills. I work on a medicine unit and we get all kinds of dementia delirium patients. But one night we had a woman who was totally with it say she needed to call her husband. And we tried to talk her out of it because it was the middle of the night, but she wouldn't let it go, so we let her. She told him she had to call because of the heart attack that was going to happen the next day. We told her she'd be fine. There was no reason for her to have a heart attack. Well, sure enough, the next night we came back and she'd had some kind of cardiac episode. She survived and has since been discharged, but we were pretty spooked when we found out it actually ended up happening. Dementia client sat up in bed on night rounds. She was crying and staring out the window. Generally she did say much, but she was inconsolably crying. Outside her window was trees and a smokestack from a mill. She was pointing at crying out Auschwitz. Auschwitz, no. No mama. I closed her curtains and had to walk out the goosebumps cause I was chilled to the bone. Had another nurse tell me about an old psych hospital in town, 100 plus years. Anyway, some sections were closed and even flooded. It was common to have call bells go off from the locked and empty building and phone calls from the units there. When you picked up, all you would hear is static or complete silence. When I was working in a neuro ICU, we had two 20-something-year-old friends come in after a really bad car accident where both suffered significant head injuries. One of them, let's call him Paul, was completely disoriented and had no idea about the accident or even where he was. His friend Chris was even worse off and showing no brain activity. Chris was eventually declared brain dead and his support was removed. Paul, meanwhile, still has no idea where he is or what is going on. Within minutes of Chris being removed from life support, Paul's nurse went into his room and he asked her, "Can you tell my friend Chris to come back in here?" When she asked him what he meant, he told her that Chris was hanging out in her room but then suddenly told him he had to leave. Meanwhile, Chris is literally being put in a body bag down the hall. Also had a lady keep asking me who the little boy was that was following me around was. That was a bit disturbing in the middle of the night. Obligatory, not me but a doctor I know. A patient of his had received a transplantation that saved her life. One day, during a visit, the patient tells him that everything's fine. Except for one thing, every night. She has the same vivid and loud nightmare. She's on some train tracks. Can't move. And a train comes at full speed over her. And that's where the dream stops. He reassuringly tells her that's just the stress of the surgery. It'll pass etc. Except that he was freaked out, as he knew that the donor had died from suicide by throwing himself under a train. Not a nurse. Just work with patients and was on the night shift. This happened around 2 or 3 in the morning. As I walked by our psych holding area. Now these psych rooms are basically little holding cells. Nothing but a bed and completely safety glass in case TV are inside of them. The windows to these rooms have blinds that can only be turned from the hallway side of the window, but if the window is struck hard enough the mechanism turns a bit. As I walked by, the woman we had in one room struck the window. And she was so close to the glass that as the blinds turned all I could see was her silhouette as she chanted in some sing-song gibberish. Scared the duck out of me. I walked into my patient's room to check on her knock shift. She points straight ahead and tells me there is my husband standing there. I got kinda freaked out since I recently lost my husband via homicide. I turned around to look and did not see anything. She kept telling me that he is standing close to me. I asked her what does he look like. She described my late husband perfectly. I got freaked out to say the least. This was an elderly lady that was mentally sharp. We had this one old guy who liked to walk the halls of the facility at night. He was always so quiet. One night, I went into a resident's room and I started to hear soft whistling. I couldn't quite figure out where it was coming from. As I was leaving the room, I saw slight movement out of the corner of my eye. It was that resident, standing between the open door and the wall. He just stood there, softly whistling. Scared the holy crap out of me. It wasn't his room. So I took his hand and walked him back to his room. Took me several minutes to get my heart rate back to a normal beat. Not the nurse but my SOAS. She jumps from various medicine floors and a few psych floors. One night in the PICU she hears this odd sound and grunting. She goes to investigate and finds some dude with his hand up his ass trying to fish out whatever is in there. Had been constipated for about 48 hours. Apparently she went as white as a ghost at the sight of him. Decompacting. Spooky, right? Worked hospital security. Well, one night when I did some overtime, a nurse called our office and asked if we could look around on the floor that she was on. I guess she just finished putting items away on the surgery floor and could hear shuffling as well, objects moving when she left. I think she just wanted to leave and didn't bother actually checking anything out. Well, anyways, I told her that it may have been just some kids outside the door because our surgery floor was right next to the maternity ward. So people were always leaving and entering at different times. But that I would check it out. So I went ahead and checked the cameras to see what was going on. That night our maternity ward was pretty shallow and we didn't have hardly any visitors for the ward. We had a feature on our cameras that could catch any movement and would highlight that time frame on the cameras. So I keep looking and noticed multiple objects come out into the hallway over and over again. Let's just say I kept away from that floor for the rest of my shift. I was taking care of a Spanish speaking only patient who had dementia and I had the time to sit with her and make sure she didn't fall out of bed. She takes my hand and starts sprinkling some invisible something into my hand and says a something in Spanish over and over. I do not understand a lot of Spanish and I have no idea if I had been blessed or cursed. I'm not actually a nurse. But I stayed at a hospital next to a woman who would scream like the devil was carving out her organs every night around 3 AM. It would scare me and the other patients awake and the nurses would go running down the hall to calm her down. I don't think she was insane. I just think the combination of whatever ailment she had and the meds they were giving her to treat it were just making her go nuts for whatever reason. I had a patient on their dying hours. She was completely silent until near the end. She wasn't in pain but oddly calm and just asked to tell the man under the bed to stop scratching at the edge of the sheets and he was scaring her a bit. I used to work in a memory care unit, dementia. Sometimes you'll be sitting there. Everyone is in bed. And then a patient will just pop up in front of the nurse's station naked. Scared the shit out of me a bunch of times. It's not super unexpected. But when you haven't heard anything in 2 hours then bam. Pen 15. It startled you to say the least. While not a patient. My wife worked a night shift in the older wing of the hospital by herself, observation unit, and watched as binders were knocked off the shelf onto the floor. She got the charge nurse to send a replacement after her lunch break. A medic buddy of mine picked up a young girl, maybe 12-14, for some type of psych problem. She said she is riding in the back with her and the girl just keeps staring up at the corner of the ceiling. Eventually my buddy asks her what she is looking at and she just flatly replies a dead girl. My buddy said she just about jumped out the back door, it was so creepy. It didn't help that it was the middle of the night and the back of the rig was just dimly lit as. Late again. But bear with me. This happened while I was still in training. During my first night shifts ever on a ward for internal medicine. It was December so we had lots of patients with pneumonia. One in particular was an old man with dementia. Who couldn't walk anymore. But loved to slip out of his bed chair and just crawl on the ground. Sounds lovely. Right? So. It was in the middle of the night and my colleague was going out for a smoke. While I was organizing the meds for the next day. I did this with my back facing the door. Suddenly. A weird feeling is creeping up on me and I hear a faint sound. I shrug it off. But I hear it again. Now louder. Then. I hear a freaking death rattle behind me. It's getting closer and my blood runs cold. I turn around and almost had a heart attack. The old man somehow got out of his bed and was crawling on the floor only using his arms. Letting out these horrible pneumonia rattling sounds. It was a picture straight out of a horror movie and the only time I really got spooked at work. I ended up waiting for my colleague. Then we put his mattress on the floor. And then he finally fell asleep. Edit, a word. Mum used to love telling two stories. One creepy, one just charming but sad. The first was an elderly lady who had hidden food. At some point in the middle of the night there was a commotion and she was found smearing her food all over the windows whilst cackling to herself. The other was when they had 3 elderly dementia patients. They were all men and each had a wife. The wives' names were Edie, Elspeth and Emma. All night long each man was calling for their wife in weird unison. Long night. But very sad when you think about it. Bonus story. A large number of her patients were retired farmers. In many cases she would bring out the food menu and the men had no idea what they wanted to order. They would usually respond with, "Well, that's my wife's department. What do you think?" She would just write down whatever the meat and 2 veg menu was and they were happy with that. My granddad was a retired farmer himself and she was well aware what kind of food old farmers enjoyed.